The night forest swallowed her footsteps as she ran, stumbling to the thick undergrowth with a breathless desperation that clawed at her chest. Shadows clung to her torn clothes, and branches whipped against her arms, leaving thin red lines across her skin. She didn't dare slow down, not when the metallic shrieks behind her grew sharper, closer, more confident. The aliens hunting her were not fast, but they were patient. They always were. They tracked her by heat, sound, even a faint tremor of fear that pulsed to the ground beneath her feet. She pushed harder, lungs burning, knowing she wasn't outpacing them. She was only delaying the inevitable. A beam of cold white light slashed between the trees, cutting through the drifting fog like a blade. She threw herself behind the thick trunk of a blackwood tree, the bark cold and damp against her cheek. Her breath came in shaky bursts. She clenched her teeth, forcing herself to stay quiet, even as her muscles trembled from exhaustion. The air was heavy with spores that glowed faintly, swirling in soft green spirals that illuminated her hiding place. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like a cruel mockery of calm. This forest, as alien as the creatures hunting her, had been her refuge for months. The towering blackwood giants formed a canopy that blocked signals, hiding her from scanners. Twisting vines hummed with bioelectric pulses, masking her movements. But tonight, nothing seemed to protect her. Not after the ambush that scattered the last human survivors she had been traveling with. She still saw flashes of it. Energy whips, screams, the bunker lights flickering as armored figures stormed to the narrow tunnels. She remembered being dragged outside by a friend only moments before a blast collapsed the entrance, trapping half their group inside forever. She didn't even know who survived now. All she had was a forest, her instincts, and a hope so thin it felt like a thread ready to snap. A sharp clicking sound echoed through the trees. She flinched. The aliens were communicating, triangulating her position. She pressed her forehead to bark, forcing herself to breathe slowly. She had learned much about them through survival. Tall insectoid, armor with chitin fuse of metal, eyes glowing like molten gold. Their movements were deliberate and methodical, as if they considered the hunt a ritual more than a task. She had seen what they did to captives. She refused to let that be her fate. Her hand drifted to the small scar on her wrist, a reminder of the life she had lived before all this. A life inside alien facilities, where humans were studied, modified, and monitored. She had been raised not only among other children, but with strange wolf-like creatures bred by the aliens for experiments. Somehow, against all odds, she had formed a bond with them, one the aliens didn't understand, one they feared. Those creatures had become her family, her protectors, her pack. She had grown up learning to read their gestures, their tones, their instincts. They saved her when the laboratory erupted into chaos during a rebellion, guiding her through shattered hallways and into the wilderness beyond. But in the frenzy of escape, they were separated. She had spent months wondering if they survived, if they somehow roamed these woods searching for the way she searched for them in every echo of the night. The clicking grew louder. She peered around the tree just long enough to see three dark silhouettes gliding between the trunks, their armor gleaming under drifting spores. One raised a scanning rod. A thin beam swept the forest floor. She jerked back as it skimmed inches from her boot. Her pulse hammered painfully. She was out of time. Her legs, stiff and weak, protested as she prepared to run again. But she knew the truth. She couldn't keep outrunning them. Not like this. Hunger gnawed at her. Pain throbbed in her ribs from a fall earlier. Her vision blurred each time she blinked. She pressed her palm against the ground for support. The soil was cool, soft, and trembling faintly. For a moment, she froze. It wasn't the tremor of alien footsteps. It was something deeper, slower, resonant. Something familiar. Her breath caught in her throat, a tiny spark of hope igniting painfully inside her chest. She listened harder, straining past the hum of the vines, past the hiss of alien equipment. There was again a faint vibration, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the earth. But she couldn't trust it. Not yet. She couldn't let herself imagine the impossible. She had spent too many nights whispering into the darkness, hoping for an answer that never came. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, forcing focus. Whatever tremor she felt could easily be another alien mechanism. The beam of light swept past her hiding spot again. This time it paused. Slowly, the silhouette turned its head toward her tree. Her stomach clenched. She pushed herself upright and stepped back quietly, trying to slip deeper into the cover of ferns. But a dry branch snapped under her heel, loud enough to shatter any hope of concealment. The alien hissed sharply, and the other two converged on her position with terrifying speed. She ran once more, pushing past branches that tore at her clothes. Their footsteps thundered behind her, closing in. A net launcher hissed, and a glowing coil flew past her face, embedding into the ground with a sizzling spark. She swerved, breath raw, tears streaking down her cheeks without her consent. Her strength finally gave out near the edge of a shallow ravine. Her foot slipped on loose soil, sending her tumbling to her knees. She couldn't rise. Her limbs shook uncontrollably. She stared at her trembling hands, furious at her own weakness. The alien shadows stretched long over her as they approached with slow, triumphant confidence. The forest fell silent, completely, unnervingly silent. Even the glowing spores halted their drift, suspended in the air as if the world itself were holding its breath. The girl lifted her head, confusion mixing with terror. A low growl rolled through the trees behind her, deep, resonant, impossibly familiar. She didn't dare turn around. Not yet. Not when she was afraid it might be nothing more than her mind breaking under fear. But the aliens turned, and for the first time she saw hesitation in their stance. The growl rolled through the forest with such force that even the alien hunters paused mid-step, their scanning rods lifting as they recalibrated their senses. The sound was deep layered, almost thunderous, vibrating through the soil and rising into the cold night air like a warning carved from the bones of the earth itself. The girl felt a tremor run up her spine, a familiar electric shiver she had not felt since she was a child hiding behind metal bars and whispering to creatures that the aliens claimed were incapable of emotion. For a moment, everything inside her stilled. That sound, it couldn't be. It couldn't. The aliens shifted formation, their armor plates clattering softly as they angled themselves defensively toward the trees. Golden eyes on their helms brightened, scanning the canopy with sharp, insect-like movements. One of them clicked rapidly, issuing a low command to the others. They raised their weapons, energy coils humming with lethal intent. The girl, still on her knees, watched them tremble, an almost imperceptible shudder, but unmistakably one born of uncertainty. These were predators who rarely encountered anything they feared. And yet now, fear clung to them like a shadow. A pair of glowing amber eyes blinked open high above the forest floor. The girl's breath hitched. Another pair shimmered to the left, then a third. The branches rustled as something massive shifted among them, moving with controlled, predatory grace. The aliens stepped back, their claws digging into ground, scanning rapidly as the forest around them seemed to awaken with quiet, deliberate movement. The girl's heart pounded, but not with terror this time. It pounded with recognition. A shape dropped from the trees, a blur of dark fur, sinewy muscle, and bioluminescent markings that flickered like blue lightning across its flank. It landed silently between the girl and the aliens, its massive frame absorbing the impact with regal ease. It stood taller than a wolf but moved like one, shoulders rolling beneath its coat, head lifted, ears flattened in silent menace. Its amber eyes locked onto the aliens, unblinking and unafraid. Then, slowly, it turned its head toward the girl. The breath left her lungs in a broken gasp. The creature stepped closer, its claws sinking softly into the soil. She saw the scar on its shoulder, a crescent-shaped mark she remembered tracing with tiny fingers when she was still small enough to hide beneath its belly. The alpha, her alpha, the one who used to lie beside her cage at night, warming her with his fur when the labs were cold. The one who protected her from other creatures, who shared food with her when she had nothing. For months after the escape, she feared he had died in the chaos. But now he stood before her, very much alive, gaze softening as he sniffed the air around her, confirming her scent. Tears blurred her vision as she reached out with a trembling hand. She didn't dare touch him yet, not until she knew he would accept it. But he closed the distance on his own, lowering his massive head, so his forehead brushed gently against hers. A soft rumble vibrated through his chest, warm and resonant, and she let out a choked sob. He remembered her. He had found her. Somehow, across all this wilderness, he had never stopped searching. Another rustle signaled the arrival of the rest of the pack. They emerged from the shadows in disciplined formation, their movements silent, coordinated, almost militaristic. Each one was lean, powerful, marked by faint luminescent streaks along their backs that pulsed like living circuitry. They flanked the girl, forming a protective circle, their growls harmonizing in a unified warning that reverberated through the trees. The aliens scrambled for better footing, suddenly realizing they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The Alpha turned his head back to the hunters and bared his teeth in a slow, deliberate display of dominance. His growl deepened, echoing like rolling thunder. The aliens raised their weapons in response, energy coils brightening to lethal blue. But their hesitation betrayed them. They had never planned for this. They had never accounted for creatures they once bred to obey turning into strategic predators capable of ambush, cooperation, and loyalty. One of the aliens fired first, releasing a crackling bolt that struck the ground near the beta wolf's paws. The forest erupted. The pack surged forward as one, a wave of fur and claws and calculated ferocity. The girl scrambled back behind a fallen log, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and awe. The wolves moved with breathtaking precision. Two flanked from opposite sides, forcing the aliens into a backward stumble. Another leapt from above, slamming into one hunter with crushing force. The Alpha darted in with lethal speed, knocking aside a raised spear and tearing into exposed wiring along the alien's armor. The fight was chaos, blue flashes of energy lighting the forest, snarls slicing through the air, alien shrieks rising like metallic screams. But beneath the chaos was a pattern, a strategy. The pack tested weaknesses, exploited blind spots, and protected one another with instinctive coordination that could only come from years of surviving together. The girl's hands shook as she watched, but she no longer felt helpless. The sight of her pack, not broken, not lost, but thriving, filled her with something she had not felt in months. Strength, belonging, a sense of purpose rising in her chest like a spark catching fire. She glanced at the Alpha, who held an alien warrior pinned beneath his massive paws. For a fleeting moment, he looked back at her, as if reminding her that she, too, had survived impossible odds. The battle pressed on, but the aliens were losing ground, their formation collapsing under the relentless coordination of the pack. One stumbled, cornered against the roots of a colossal blackwood tree. The girl rose slowly from behind the log, gripping a fallen branch for balance. Her legs were weak, but her steps were steady. She was done running. The creatures who raised her had returned, and she would no longer be the frightened child hiding in the dark. The final alien, wounded and retreating, turned toward her with a flicker of defiance. Before it could regain its stance, a low snarl vibrated behind her. Protective, territorial, final. The Alpha stepped to her side, towering over her like a living wall of fury and strength. She met his gaze with quiet determination, understanding that the fight was far from over, but for the first time, she did not face it alone. The wounded alien staggered backward, its armor cracked open in several places where the pack's claws had torn through synthetic plating. Sparks flickered along its limbs as it tried to recalibrate, but the damage was too extensive. It looked from the girl to the Alpha, its golden eyes dimming with a strange, almost fearful tremor. She felt no pity, not after everything they had taken, not after the countless nights she had spent hiding beneath dirt and shadow, waiting for a dawn she feared she would never see. Yet she also felt no desire for revenge. She wanted only to end this chase, to reclaim a life that had been denied to her since birth. The alien hissed a final warning, raising its weapon with trembling hands. The beam flickered, unstable, wavering like a dying flame. Before it could fire, the Alpha lunged. His massive form collided with the alien, sending both sliding across the forest floor in a violent blur. The weapon clattered away, striking a rock and bursting into a small shower of sparks. The rest of the pack tightened their formation, surrounding the struggle, but giving their leader room to finish what had been started. The girl moved closer, compelled by instinct rather than intention. She felt a pull, a connection to the conflict before her, not as a bystander, but as someone intrinsically woven into its threads. She had spent years watching these creatures in the labs, studying their behaviors, understanding their strategies. She knew when a fight was ending. She recognized a shift in momentum, the moment the predator gained absolute control. The alpha pinned the alien with effortless force, his fangs bared inches from the enemy's throat. The alien froze, its limbs weakening, its strength fading. There was a sharp exhale, a sound almost like resignation. The alpha lifted his head, his bioluminescent markings pulsing softly as if responding to the girl's presence. He stepped back, leaving the alien incapacitated but alive. She understood the message. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about protection, survival, and the unspoken code their pack had always lived by. The girl exhaled slowly, her racing heart beginning to settle. The forest, moment ago filled with furious motion, now seemed to hold a fragile stillness. The wounded alien crawled backward, leaving a faint trail in the moss. It looked at her one last time. There was no hatred left in its gaze, only confusion, maybe even curiosity. She wondered briefly if it saw her now not as prey but as something wild and unpredictable, something it had never been trained to understand. The alien stumbled to its feet, turned and vanished into the dense trees, moving with a limp that echoed its defeat. The girl did not follow. She knew the pack would have, had the alpha commanded it, but he did not. Instead, he approached her slowly, his steps careful, deliberate. The others followed, some limping from injuries, others brushing their muzzles against her hands, as if greeting a long-lost littermate returned after years apart. She felt overwhelmed by the closeness, by the warmth of their bodies encircling her. For so long, she had been alone, living on borrowed strength and fading hope. Now she stood surrounded by the only family she had ever truly understood. The alpha lowered his head again, brushing his cheek against her shoulder. She placed her hand over his fur, feeling the familiar thrum of his heartbeat beneath her palm. The rhythm matched the tremors she had felt through the earth earlier. He had been close for longer than she realized. They had all been close. A distant rumble rolled across the sky, breaking the moment. She looked up. The clouds parted just enough for her to see a silhouette drifting far above the treetops. Smooth, angular, unmistakably alien. A dropship, larger than any she had seen before. Her stomach tightened. The hunters she had faced were just a scouting unit. If the larger ship deployed more soldiers, the pack would face an army too vast for even their instincts and coordination to overcome. The alpha followed her gaze, ears twitching. A low growl built in his chest, not of fear, but of readiness. The pack responded, their eyes turning toward the sky, bodies tensing. The girl realized with a sinking certainty that this was not over. The aliens would not retreat, simply because one group had been defeated. They would come back stronger, determined to reclaim what they believed they owned. Her. She couldn't let that happen. She would not allow these creatures, her pack, to fall defending her against an enemy that never learned mercy. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the terrain. The blackwood forest stretched endlessly to the north, its dense canopy offering shelter. To the south lay the ravine she had nearly fallen into. To the east, faint trails of rising steam marked geothermal vents she had used in the past to evade detection. These lands were familiar to her. She knew their pathways, their dangers, their hidden strengths. For the first time since her escape from the facility, she felt something ignite inside her, a sense of strategy, purpose, and fierce protectiveness. She wasn't just the girl the pack had saved. She was part of them, and she could fight beside them. The alpha's gaze locked onto hers, steady and knowing, as if he sensed a shift in her resolve. She nodded once, a silent pledge forming between them. If the aliens were coming, she would face them, but not as prey, not as an experiment escaped from a cage. She would face them as a girl who had survived their oppression, as a child raised among wolves, and as a member of a pack that feared nothing beneath the forest canopy. The distant hum of the dropship deepened, signaling its descent. The girl stepped forward, surrounded by the creatures who had once shared her captivity and now shared her freedom. The forest held its breath once more. The next battle, she knew, would decide everything.